Greetings once again, and welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. Today we get to interview Aimee Bernstein. Aimee has a passion to help people, among other things, unleash their full potential. And Aimee is an organizational consultant, trainer, and a keynote speaker with over 40 years of experience in all of this. And oh my gosh, that sounds almost like me. I won't ask you how old you are, but Aimee, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here.
Thank you so much. And I'm not telling you how old I am.
So there you go. Well, that's okay. 40 years is a lot of experience. And some people would say, well, that means you're old enough that you're getting more in toward the senior world. And it's interesting, it just popped into my head to ask about this, that unfortunately, I see so many times that people think that as people are getting older, they really don't have as much value in the corporate and in the whole structure of things, and they tend to be ignored a lot more than probably they should, because people don't recognize the incredible vast amount of experience that seniors bring that other people haven't figured out yet or gotten to yet. Don't you think?
Yeah, I actually agree. I think that what we know as seniors is that what worked yesterday doesn't necessarily work tomorrow. And because we've been through transitions in life, and we've seen how we've grown and changed, and how the organizations have grown and changed too. I mean, when I came in, organizations were just autocratic. Then they started talking about, be authentic and transparent and stewardship and stuff like that. Well, they haven't achieved it 100%.
No.
What we see the road a little clearer because we've been down it. And the other thing is, I think that I am better than I've ever been in my life. I think I'm wiser. I think I have more to offer. I'm more connected to my soul than my ego, like I was when I was very young. So, I do think that organizations sometimes pass us by. And what I've discovered is what comes to me is mine. What doesn't come to me is not mine. So it's all fun.
Well, and the other thing about it is that what we bring, especially if we work at it, is a significant historical perspective to whatever, so that when we work at a company, and if we worked at other companies through our lives and so on, we bring a lot of historical perspective that can help companies and younger leaders if they would but listen. But they think, well, but you're too old, so you really don't add any value anymore, which is so untrue.
Yeah. Well, so far I haven't really dealt with a lot of that yet. We'll see what happens over time.
Yeah. Well, that's of course something that just will remain to be seen. Well, as a consultant and as a coach, people seek you out, so that helps a lot also, of course.
Yeah. It's been very much for me, it's been very much word of mouth. So, I worked with Sports Authority. The vice president of HR for Sports Authority liked my work. And when she went to Dolce & Gabbana, she took me with her. Then she went and had a lunch with a girlfriend who was the vice president of HR for Chanel. So all of a sudden I'm working for Chanel. It's always been like that for me. So we'll see what the future brings.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. And that's a good reputation to have, that people seek you out and come and will invite you to come and be a part of what they do.
Yes. I think the other thing is that when I was 30, I was very interested it was the women's movement. I was very interested in power. What is power? And in this country, you learn about power in corporations or in politics. So I went into corporations and started working with them. At this point in my life, it's not that I know 100%, but I know pretty well power. I've studied it experientially and informationally for years. So I'm pretty comfortable there. Now, my real interest is in helping people evolve their consciousness, because I see that the world's consciousness is changing. And consciousness is energy. Energy has a frequency. The frequency has sped up in order to unravel the old for the new to be born. And in the process, it's breaking down the old, right? So you see it all around us, whether it's, systems, cultures, conflicts, wars, whatever. I want to be there for the leaders of tomorrow who want to make a better world.
Well, how overall do you think it is changing?
I see that, I sense that as the consciousness increases, that there'll be more of a sense of the greater good. I don't mean that as 100%, but, we're in a system where politicians oftentimes are ego-driven, where people are ego-driven in the sense of I have to get mine before you can have yours. I think that it's going to be a little more compassionate. I see women 35 to 55, that age, that group of women, because they have some experience, as they step into more of their power. I believe that they're going to be some of the leaders that lead us into the new world, because they're more willing to be compassionate, to work with others, to, they see things in a different way. It's not just my way or the highway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We'll see if I'm right or not. Who knows,
Well, we will see. It's interesting right now. It's still very much in a lot of ways men controlling a lot of things, and there are some challenges there. Do you see men in any way becoming more compassionate, becoming more open to, well, we have to look out for the other person as much as we do ourselves?
Yeah, I have a new friend, a guy named Sean Harvey, that is actually doing that work with men. He has a company called Warrior Compassion, and he's helping men become more compassionate. So what I see is that we all have male and female in us. So obviously I'm a woman, I'm more female, but I have a male quality in me. I think that, as little boys, men, oftentimes we're told not to show their feelings, don't look weak, don't be vulnerable, that kind of stuff. And I think men are beginning to recognize that it's okay, that in fact, it's part of their strength. And someone like Sean is helping men do that. So I do think that change is going to happen in both women and men.
I hope. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I hope it does lead to more of a trusting environment than we're used to. And I think I would think probably to some degree both men and women, but certainly a lot with men, that we don't trust, and we're taught not to trust, even though we do mostly like to be in a pack with other people and so on. It isn't that we like to be an island ourselves, although I think there are any number of us who think that we did it all and we didn't and don't need anyone else, and that just isn't true. But I would hope that we're leading the way to establishing a little bit more of a trusting environment and a trusting world.
Yeah, I hope so too. It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And, I'm not talking about vulnerability in terms of stupidity. So you don't want to be vulnerable to someone who has wants to harm you.
Mm-hmm.
But to be vulnerable, particularly like with your employees who work for you, that's a strength. You model that, or to be vulnerable with your family, with your friends. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we will.
Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly sounds like the voice of experience I'm talking to here. So that's a good thing. To get back to that. Tell us a little bit about the early Aimee, growing up and all that stuff that kind of got you started on the road where you are.
Yeah. I would say that the experience that I had as a little young girl was that I couldn't handle pressure. When I would hear my parents yell or be on the tennis court and I'm dealing with too much physical pressure, I would have an epileptic seizure. I had petite mal. I grew out of petite mal when I was like 13 or so, but in those years, I just couldn't handle the pressure. My parents, recognizing that I had dance talent, ended up sending me to Marjorie Marshall School of Dance in the Bronx. Marjorie Marshall was the mother of Penny and Gary Marshall, the producers and directors. And Marjorie was a stage mother. It was the time of the Rockettes, and she wanted these little girls to be mini Rockettes. So she put a lot of pressure on us. But instead of having a seizure, I would just open and align and merge with this energy of pressure. And I was free. It was like I was a ball of motion, a ball of energy in motion. I was so happy, joyous. I didn't understand why in one situation pressure was an enemy and why in another situation pressure was my ally, until I was in my 20s and I met a teacher named Robert Nadeau, who's an 8th Dan Aikido master. Aikido is a martial art, and they call it the martial art of love or peace. It's about the harmonious resolution of conflict. Well, I didn't give a squat about Aikido, martial art, but I had experiences with this guy. I had met him through friends of mine, and I had experiences with him that I couldn't understand why I was having these experiences. I thought, oh, it was my imagination, but I kept having them with him. So I ended up going to study with him. And what I learned in the process was that pressure was the energy of change, and that there was a universal law which says whenever there's a job or task to do, energy comes into your system in the amount needed to do the job. Now, I understood that because, I had been a dancer. I was a singer. I used to perform for like thousands of people, and you feel that rush of energy before you went on stage. Similarly, when I'd give a speech in a corporation, you feel that energy, right? Your heartbeat, legs get shaky. Okay, you run a race, same thing. Well, what he taught was instead of resisting it or forcing your will, instead of collapsing, oh, I'm such a victim, why is life treating me so bad? Instead of staying in your head and making believe nothing was happening, oh, you're cool, you're going with the flow, He taught you how to open and align and merge with this energy. And when you did, what happened was it would enhance your performance, your creativity, and raise your states of consciousness, your level of consciousness. So learning how to deal with pressure has been life-changing for me, because it taught me how to open up to finer versions of myself. In other words, we all have different versions of ourselves, even in the course of a day. There's the usual Michael, right? Let me say it this way. There's usual Aimee.
Michael's fine too. It's okay. There's the usual Michael.
Okay, there's the usual Aimee, let's just say. Okay, and she gets along pretty well and she gets her work done and all of that stuff. And then there's every once in a while, Aimee shifts. She reacts or something happens and she shifts to a smaller version of herself where she can react and say things or do things that she wishes she could take back. Then there is this version of Aimee that is just amazing. She's open, she's big, things come out of my mouth that I don't even know that I know. It's like I'm channeling it. My performance is extraordinary. I'm intuitive like you can't imagine. I'm creative like you can't imagine,
Yeah.
Well, the same is true with all of us. All of us. We all have those places of being extraordinary. My friend Felice, when she gives his presentation, she owns the room. My friend Jeff, when he's in the car, it doesn't matter who's trying to, get in front of him or cut him off or whatever. He just is king of the road. He's so calm. My mother used to pick up a crying baby and the kid would immediately stop crying. We all have those places in us. The thing is, we don't know how we got there. So they remain extraordinary moments. What Nado taught was how to shift to a upgraded version of yourself so that the extraordinary became more ordinary. You knew how to call it in. That was life-changing.
Yeah. Do you think that, speaking of pressure, a lot of the pressure that we feel is really self-imposed, and that there are reasons for that?
There is the pressure of the situation. So if it's a small little situation, there's a little bit of pressure. If it's a huge situation, big situation, there's a whole bunch of pressure. So there's that. And then there is our reaction to that pressure. So some people, what they do is they go in their heads and they start analyzing and telling stories. That adds more pressure to it. It doesn't help the situation, it harms it. So we end up, if you close down to it or you start telling stories or stay in your head with it, you're going to feel discomfort, distress, and over time, if you keep doing that, disease.
I am in the process of finishing a book. Actually, it's written and it's in the hands of the publishers, and they're doing what publishers do. But it's a lot about controlling fear and learning to control fear. And one of the things that I read a lot as I prepared and began writing this book is that oftentimes fear exists in our lives because we really don't know how to control it. And we, in fact, become just afraid of so many things, or because it's uncertain, we're afraid of it, or for any number of reasons. And we fear so many things that really are irrelevant. There's nothing and no reason to be afraid, but we become afraid until we really can stop and analyze what is going on in our lives and recognize, oh, why am I afraid of that? Because that has nothing to do with me.
I agree with you that we certainly make it worse by all the stories that we tell. But see, my training was different. My training was, instead of just being aware or trying to be rational, I learned that insights don't necessitate change. If they did, everybody would get their New Year's Eve resolutions met. What I learned is to get out of my head and into my mind body.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that control begins when you give it up, because control is the ego trying to protect itself. And as soon as you shift into your mind body, you can open to that flow. And when you open to the flow, that becomes an easy journey. It moves you in the right directions.
Yeah, and I'm not at all saying that controlling fear is about just being rational. I don't expect people to become Mr. Spock, but rather that you learn to use, as you would call it, your mind body, that you learn to look at yourself and spend time practicing introspection, practicing understanding yourself, and raising that awareness that helps you recognize that you don't need to be so afraid. What you can do is use what we call fear as a very powerful tool to help you function better, and it can help steer you.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I agree with you. My formula is self-awareness plus presence, or mind, body, and body, embodiment stuff, creates the skillful action or the transformation. So, I agree with you. I see fear as energy coming into the system, and what we do is we close down to it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I experience, so my solar plexus gets tight, right? That's the place of fear most, and I lose my grounding, I lose my center, so I just go in my head and I get, more stories, I make it worse. So yeah, I agree with you. The self-awareness is an important aspect to understand, the patterns and no, I don't need to do that and all that kind of stuff. And then but to make the true shift, you need to go back into your mind body.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I've seen it both ways. I used to live with a Grammy Award winning pianist, and you put the man in front of the piano, and he was just extraordinary. You take him away from the piano, and he was needy and had a lot of issues in life, had a very tough time. On the other hand, I've seen people who are so brilliant in awareness, self-awareness, but it's all ideas, it's all information. They don't know how to actually live in that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Facebook pages, you see all this wisdom, this spiritual wisdom, but, I don't believe that everybody is actually living it, So you need both. You do need both.
Talk is cheap. And, I remember hearing once, I'm a fan of old radio shows, and one of the best comedians and ventriloquists was Edgar Bergen and his sidekick, Charlie McCarthy. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I heard people say, Edgar Bergen really just didn't know how to talk to people. And so he did it through Charlie. And it worked out, I guess, all right for him. But I hear exactly what you're saying. He had to do it through Charlie as opposed to just doing it himself.
Yeah.
On the other hand, he made a good career out of it. So what do you do?
Yeah.
Quite a biting sense of humor and a really great sense of humor. So where did you go to college?
I went to Hunter College in New York, part of the New York City chain of colleges, mm-hmm. City College of New York. And I was 16 when I went to college, and my manager found me. I used to sing with his son, and he was the clarinetist for the Tommy Dorsey band, old Tommy Dorsey band. So he found me singing. He liked me, so he had my parents sign a contract where he became my manager. So when I went off to college, he insisted that I was going to go in for politics. He insisted that I get my degree in music, which I did. And then I went and I got my master's later, but not in music, in counseling, psychology. So
what do you think about having gotten a bachelor's in music? Was that okay? Are you
yes,
happy with that?
Yeah. My first job was working as a music teacher in the Bronx in a ghetto. And what I discovered was that I cared more about the kids and what they were going through than whether they knew who Beethoven was. So that ended up moving me to, going into psychology. So,
well, and that's fine. You sensed that, and you sensed that you obviously had something to contribute to helping other kids, which is, of course, part of your goal that we talked about at the beginning, that you like to help others.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that everything that happens in life is for your higher good. So all of that music stuff was great. I had wonderful, when I went off to, when I left that job, I went off to, I ended up going to California, and I ended up being in a rock gospel band with 20 singers and 5 backup players and 2 tap dancers. And we did front act for Crosby, Stills and Nash and the Grateful Dead and Ram Dass and Krishna Das. It was a great time of life. Just fun, until my father sat me down with his big cigar and said to me, "You're either going to get married or get a career." I said, "Okay, I'll get a career." So I went and I got my master's. It all worked out fine.
So how long ago was that?
Oh, too long ago to even mention.
So did you move back to New York?
No, I didn't. I stayed in California for 18 years. And then I moved moved to Florida. My parents were getting older, and I felt like I needed to be there, which was a good thing. A year and a half later, my father got ill. So it was all worked out.
Well, it did. And has he passed now, or?
Yeah, my father passed a long time ago, and my mother did too.
Oh, your
So,
mom did too. Yeah. And both of
yeah.
my parents did in the 1980s. And
Mhm.
I miss them a lot.
Yeah.
And then my wife of 40 years just passed last November. But as I tell people, I got to be a good kid and behave because I'm sure that she's monitoring. And if I misbehave, I'm going to hear about it. No doubt in my mind.
Yep, I agree. I believe that too. Yeah.
I always thought that Karen was smarter than I was. So sometimes things would pop out that just little nuggets of wisdom that
Mhm.
I never thought of, and I'm not surprised at that. So I'm sure she's monitoring, and I'll
Yeah.
just do my best to be a good kid,
Yeah.
keep the cat happy, which is the biggest goal in life.
I understand.
Well, you so you got a degree in counseling, and what did you do with that exactly?
I was actually, again, things worked out great. I wanted to go into, they had different groups in master's degree where like you interned in different groups. So one group was the existential group, which was very big at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Existential counseling. And, they were climbing mountains and doing all kinds of things. And I wanted to get into that group and they were all filled. So I got into the behavioral group. And it was a blessing. I got my training from at Mass General Hospital under the auspices of Harvard Medical School.
Mm.
Studied under Dr. Matt Dumont, who was the Commissioner of Mental Health for the state of Massachusetts at that time. So I had a fabulous education. When I was done, and I was, as the intern, what I was doing was addictions counseling. So I learned a lot about how to deal with people with addictions. And one of my first clients was manic depressive. I learned a lot on the job that way. Came back once I was done there. I ended up going out to California and I worked as an addiction counselor for a number of years until I got done with that. And then went into employee assistance programming and then started my own school, which was the Living Arts School, teaching people about this energy work, dealing with stress and pressure and all that. And then changed once again when I became interested in empowerment, and I started the Women's Development Company, which was the first mentoring company for women out in California.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been all a ride. One thing has led to another.
Now, where are you now?
Now I am
Where
doing.
where do you
Excuse
live
me.
now?
Where do I live now? I live in South Florida.
Okay, so you're in Florida. Okay.
Yeah, until I get a clue about where I need to move next. I've been here a long time. I'm ready to go, but
Ah,
yeah, I'm not sure where that would be.
somebody sent me a video last week, a commercial for Antarctica, but
Nope, not my place.
I pointed out that I'm not going to go there. There's no Costco. There's no Target. It's a little bit colder than I like, so I'm sticking where I am. I'm fine in Victorville, California. It gets cold enough here. Yeah, too cold and too many other things than that don't exist in Antarctica. So we're not going there.
Yep. Yep.
Well, so today it seems to me we have a lot of stuff going on. We have a spike in mental illness, divisiveness, a lack of trust that we talked about, even the weather. What the heck is going on?
Well, I kind of mentioned at the beginning, I believe that the consciousness of the world is changing. And I think people can't handle that kind of frequency, that increased frequency. They don't recognize that it's an increased frequency. They just feel pressure. So, there's more fentanyl deaths and shootings, mass shootings. I mean, I don't have to tell you, you watch the news, but yeah, we are. But the good part is this is an opportunity for each one of us to evolve our consciousness, So I've been going through this myself over the last few years. And I had a dream where I'm looking at my computer and there's a red curtain, it opens, and there are people in boxes and they're singing. And I call my mother over, who is deceased, in this life. I call her over in the dream and I said, Mom, I can't believe that I created this. This is amazing. And in the morning, I heard part of the song.
Mm.
When the message from your core tells you you are more, don't shrink, don't think, believe it. When the message from your soul tells you you are whole, don't shrink, don't think, believe it. And that's when I created the Roar of the More mind, body, energy training and coaching series. It was all the work that I've been showing executives over all these years. And I put it together in a package and wanted to give it to the public. So that was a huge shift for me. And it was my way of helping those who are ready to evolve, who go, yeah, this is an opportunity for me. I'm done with the old. It's not that the old was bad. I'm just done with it. I want more. Those who sense the more, that roar of the more.
Well, it is an evolutionary process, and it gets back to introspection and everything else. And the more we think about what we do each day, what worked, what didn't work, and I don't like to use the word failure because it's got a negative connotation that it doesn't need to have. But what worked, what didn't work, the stuff that worked, could we make it work better? The stuff that didn't work, what's the deal with it, and what do we do about it? It's all about what we choose to do about learning about how to move forward. And we seem to not like to teach that. I know that we just don't seem to do too much teaching of introspection and self-analysis at all, which is extremely unfortunate because we're our own best teachers and we just don't tend to want to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's certainly not something people learn in school. You have to go to counseling for it or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of life skills that we just don't teach. I mean, being introspective is one of them, but certainly well-being in general. What I eat and how I move and all of that. How I talk, how to deal with conflict. How to reduce, what is self-care? All that stuff we don't talk about.
No. Well, yeah. or anywhere really.
I'm teaching that in nonprofit organizations now,
right,
and I'm teaching it at a couple of corporations, but it's all new. Nobody talked about self-care 10 years ago. This is all new stuff. That self-care is on everybody's lips.
Yeah.
But it's not institutionalized. That's the thing. It's, like during the pandemic, a good boss will call you up and say, how you doing? And you tell him a little bit, but you're not going to tell him the whole deal, because if you tell him, man, I'm really stressed out, he's going to think, oh, she can't handle the pressure, so she's not promotable, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I had one vice president of HR got a new job for a big company that was, real into productivity, performance, all this kind of stuff, major corporation. And he said to me, and I like this guy, he's smart, he's good with people, he's great at his job. 6 months in or so, 9 months in, he said to me, Aimee, I'm really stressed. I said, look, why don't you create a self-care plan and, do it for a few months till you see some results and you're feeling better, and then announce it to your staff and, maybe make a video or have a call with them or whatever, tell them about your plan and ask everyone to make a plan for themselves. Then you're modeling it. He said, no. And I understood, because he didn't want people to think that he couldn't handle it, that tough enough, that he wasn't. So until leaders can institutionalize it by modeling it, we do a little bit of it, but certainly not enough.
We just can't seem to be able to get past this idea that we have to be tough and macho. And I think it's more men than women, but it happens all the way around. And we just seem to not want to be able to recognize that there are a whole lot more aspects to our lives than we like to admit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I saw some research a few months ago where they said that women who have the same success records as the men in corporations, and maybe even a little better, will not get promoted as fast because they don't have that tough kind of edge to them that that the man has, and that's considered leadership.
And it's not, but it is considered leadership.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And the reality is it's different characteristics and different abilities and different capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's just as much leadership, and we don't tend to deal with it. People have asked me, actually, somebody asked me last week, what do I get out of doing all these podcasts? And I thought it was a fair question. Nobody's ever asked me before, but I had made up my mind a long time ago that for me, if I'm learning at least as much as anybody else who listens to the podcast, then I'm getting something out of it. And one of the biggest things that I have learned, and I've mentioned it a few times, although not quite in this context, is that for many years, I would talk about listening to speeches as a public speaker would travel and speak, and I always recorded and listened to speeches later. And as I said, I'm my own worst critic because no one's going to be tougher on me than I am. But I learned along the way that actually I'm the only one who can teach me anything. Teachers can provide information, but I'm the only one who can teach me, and I have to want to learn it and teach it to myself. And what I have started saying literally this year, which is, I think, probably the biggest thing that I've learned doing 2.5 years of podcasts is I'm my own best teacher. Forget my own worst critic. That's negative. I'm my own best teacher. And that's really what I think is a major paradigm shift that a lot of people ought to do, is not worrying about being tough on themselves. How do I learn? And how do I, and that gets back to introspection, but how do I learn and grow? And that's what we just tend not to do. But we all are our own best teachers.
Yeah, I agree that the only one that can ultimately teach me is me. You know, it's me that's going through the experience. It's me that's allowing things. And yet I see that I am blinded at times. I am blinded. I
Sure.
don't know it all. I don't know it all. So I have
Right.
a certain perspective, you know, and when I meet people who can show me things, point out things that I hadn't seen or hadn't recognized or hadn't experienced, that's even better. Experienced, wow, that just opens the door for me. That, you know, takes me to a whole other place. So I think it's both, you know, it's me. I have to go through it myself. I have to want it. And yeah, and I need people to show me the way sometimes.
At the same time, the reason you're able to do that, though, is that you've taught yourself to be open to looking for new experiences and looking for new ideas and concepts and attitudes. And yeah, there can be some times that you can be closed to that, but I would bet more often than not, you've chosen to learn to be open.
Yes. That's my company is called Open Minded Ventures.
There you go. See, exactly.
Yeah. Because, you know, I recognize that, I mean, you get these spiritual leaders who give you these absolute truths. We are all one. We are all love. You know, I am God and you are God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now, I mean, I agree. But man, are you living there 24/7? I don't think so. You know, you know, we're still human beings in human bodies, and you know, so you have these experiences, and then you shift back to a more material, physical plane. You know, I'm curious. My teacher said something to me that shifted me in a way that was huge. I've always believed that my main purpose in life was to help others, you know, to in whatever way, help them evolve, help them get off drugs, help them, whatever it was, you know. And what he said to me was, your main purpose in life is for yourself to return to self.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who might not understand, we all have different versions of ourselves that operate at different dimensions. And then there is the true self or soul, right? And over the course of your lifetimes, you're learning things. You're just, you're getting rid of certain karma. You're having certain experiences, right? You're growing, evolving. Okay. And the next life, hopefully you do a little bit better or whatever. And over time, that's the game. He said, that's the journey. He said, when he said that to me, it was like, oh, it was so clarifying to me, to be able to align my perceptions, my energy, to that self, that true self. So that when I'm making a decision, that's my, that's how I make it. I ask myself, will that get me to my true self more? Does that align me to my true self? Or is that my ego? Because I got an ego. We all got egos,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah. Anyhow, I'm sure why I'm sharing this with you, but it was very life-changing for me.
Well, we've been talking about this shift in consciousness that's going on. What do we need to know in our lives for this shift in consciousness to help us?
You need to know how to open, align, and merge with pressure, the energy of change, because the pressure is only going to get greater. And if you open and align to it, what happens is your human energy system. Okay, so we all have an energy system, right? Guy goes to war, he cut his arm off, it gets amputated, right? He still feels pain in the arm initially. Right? We all have an energy body. Okay, what we need to do is align the energy body, your energy human system, to the universal system. Einstein said that's where all creative ideas exist. So we know that, for example, when where do the best idea? When do you have the best ideas? Oh, when you're in the shower. Oh, when you just wake up. Oh, after sex. Oh, when you're very relaxed. That's when the great ideas come. Well, what we need to learn is how to open and welcome this energy of change, this pressure, so that we can align our human systems with the universal, so that we begin to pick up these creative ideas, this energy flow that will lead us into a better world.
It all still gets back to us being open to doing that, but that's exactly what we need to do.
Yes. We're finding more people are. I mean, it's no big surprise to me that, I don't know how many years ago, 10 years, 20 years ago, mindfulness comes in.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 20 years old, nobody talked about mindfulness.
Nobody talked about mindfulness.
Yeah, the only people, I was in a group of people studying Aikido. Yeah, we were meditating. We were doing all that. We were studying energy work. We called it energy training at that time. But we were a very small group of people doing that. Now mindfulness is just like, it's everyday kind of stuff.
Well, it is, but I think a lot of people don't really understand it. They use the word, they throw it around, but yes. I do agree that more and more people are learning about what mindfulness really means and how to become more mindful in their own lives.
Yes.
It's a process.
It is a process. The problem is that, I was talking to a guy who is a mindfulness teacher, and he's a big hoo-ha in South Florida. He's very good at what he does. And he was saying that what he finds is people will take a mindfulness class and maybe they'll even, but then they're done. It's like, I've done it.
Yeah,
what I learned is you don't get to Carnegie Hall without practice, right?
Right.
You need to keep doing. I have 10 years on the mat in Aikido. I have 40 years studying with the same energy teacher. Practice. So yeah, these people who they do it and then they're ready to do something else. It's Lady Gaga shallow.
Yeah. Well, again, it's all about I'm my own best teacher, and just taking the class is only the door that opens to give you access to the information. It's a question of what you do with it.
Yes. Yes.
You wrote a book called Stress Less, Achieve More, which is great. And you distinguish between stress and pressure. Tell me about that, if you would.
Yeah. Pressure, as I said, was the energy of change coming into your system to help you deal with the situation. Okay. Stress is the resistance to that energy. Now, there have been, there's one woman who speaks about how you deal with it, and she has you strike a pose to be able to handle it. And yes, that works. But that's something that is imposed, rather than me tapping into, me becoming so expert at sense feeling that I can move with the flow easily. Am I making sense?
You are.
Yeah. It's like I had this experience when I was younger. I was at every year they'd have an Aikido retreat, and they have a talent show at the end of the Aikido retreat. So you're practicing Aikido for 7 days, day and night, blah, blah. Okay. Now they have the talent show. So I sang The Rose. And I practiced and practiced and practiced. I had it down. And I had a woman who was the pianist. And okay, I go to sing the song. I start singing it. And I remember the words. I remember the tune. But it's coming out differently than how I practiced it. Like the phrasing is different. And I get really scared. I can't call a do-over. I got to keep going. So I just kind of go with it. At the end of the song, my teacher runs over to me, picks me up, and hugs me. And I realized what that was about was the pressure was so big, the energy was so big in that performance that I couldn't control it in the way that I had practiced it. I just had to let it go. And in letting it go, there was a flow that was even better than what I had practiced. And my teacher saw that. He saw and experienced that flow in me. And that's why he came over to, hug me, congratulate me. Mm-hmm. I think that we need to learn how to I keep repeating myself. I don't mean to, but opening to that flow is enormous.
It is.
To learn how to do that, to let go, to let go of the control, to soften and surrender with it, to move with it, to analyze too. So, the analysis of it is to recognize when you make a decision and you do an action, what is the ripple effects of that action? We don't usually consider it. So, for example, I used to live on a lake, a bunch of houses on a lake, and one of the homeowners complained that there was weeds growing. So the association, in all its wisdom, came and chopped down the weeds. Problem solved, right? No, until the snakes that were so used to being in the weeds came on the land. So then the homeowners association had to go get someone to catch the snakes. Problem solved, right? No, because now the rats had nothing to eat. So they came back on the land. What I learned and what I teach in Stress Less, Achieve More is an inner map for aligning with that energy of change, so that when you're making a decision, right, you are moving with the flow. You're not just going off on your great ideas about things.
It all comes from from a standpoint of dealing with change and doing your best to recognize, or not, which is what happened with what you're describing. People didn't anticipate very far ahead at all.
No, and most people don't. They do an action and, oh, that's a great decision, but they don't see how it affects people.
Yeah. You talk a lot about the whole issue of the way to relieve stress is to eat, sleep at least 8 hours a day, have a good support network, and so on. But in your book, you say that often that's not really enough. Can you kind of explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the way that we have it down is we have to do something more in order to relieve stress. Now, I'm all for meditation, yoga, all that kind of stuff, So, yes, keep doing it. However, what I've learned is you need to let go of that which is creating the stress. So, you need to learn to settle your energy down. When three guys are coming to attack you, right? You can't go meditate. You can't go do yoga. You can't do anything. You got to be there immediately. You're going to get a huge rush. Three guys are coming to attack you.
Yeah.
Everything in the universe is a two beat. The waves come in, the waves go out. The sun rises, sun sets. You're on the highway, someone cuts you off, you go, right? The energy comes up. What we don't teach people is how to settle it down.
Mm-hmm.
Once you settle it down, see, people want to be happy. They want to be high. I want awareness. I want to be happy, joy. But that's all great, except that's only half of it.
Mm-hmm.
You need a foundation, a grounding. The tree with the biggest, deepest roots is the tree that's going to still stand with the hurricane force winds.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing for us. We need to settle that energy down and ground it. Let it ground so that we can understand another person. Understand. We sense under them, right? It's not a mental process understanding. It's sensing under them so that we sense what they're feeling, what's going on with them, right? As you learn to ground and settle your energy down, which comes through practice, there is a new confidence that begins to happen. Just like you throw a stone into the water and it spreads out, ripples out. When you ground your energy, you got to get a spread that happens. It spreads out, right? So what you'll start feeling is more spacious. You'll feel more empowered. You'll feel more confidence, which is what people want. It's not a mind game. It's an experience of grounding and opening and spreading, radiating like the sun.
Yeah. And you have to feel it and you have to let it in.
Yes, that's right.
I know when I started speaking, and occasionally people still ask, but when I started speaking, people said, aren't you afraid to get up and speak in public? You don't know what the audience is doing. You got to be afraid, aren't you? And I never have been afraid of speaking in public. But when people started to ask me that, I remember a few times thinking, gee, am I supposed to really be nervous when I get up and speak? And when I got up and spoke after some of those things started to enter my mind, I went, wait a minute, this is not what you do. You have been enjoying it. The audiences have been enjoying you. Don't get nervous about something there's not some need to be nervous about. What I did learn, though, was more techniques about how to analyze how the audience was reacting to what I said. So I thank people for asking me the question, but not for the reason that they thought. But I have never, and it was a volitional decision, I've never felt fear of public speaking, because I also realized early on, I don't talk to an audience, I talk with an audience, and that's what I should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I understand.
Mm-hmm. And, that's really kind of the way it ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's your formula for personal transformation? How do we get people to move toward what you're describing?
First, you have to, the formula is the self-awareness plus the embodiments creates the transformation and all that. But in order to do that, you have to meet them where they are. You know, you need to make a blend with them and see the world from their perspective, which means that you need to take off your own shoes in order to stand in theirs. And when you can see the seed of truth, then you can begin to lead them in another direction, because now you're in harmony with them. Now they have the choice and the right to say no. Right. I was working with the senior vice president of a world-class business, a cosmetic company. The first day I worked with him, I did some energy work with him. And he was a guy that was a very good man, had a couple of daughters. So when he worked with the women of his team, he ended up being a benevolent patriarch.
Mm.
So instead of them solving problems among themselves, daddy would come in and help them solve the problem. Right? So I did this energy stuff with him, and he saw his pattern. And I said to him, in order to create your dream team, change has to happen. Change begins with you. You have to change first.
Mm-hmm.
He left, and he told me later he was pissed off. How dare I say that to him? Because most consultants will tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
They want the money, they want the job, you know what I mean? But I don't do that. So, but then he went home and he thought about it, and he said, she's right. And I worked with this guy for 6 years, until he retired. I think that by making the blend and telling them the truth, and then they make the decision, just like you said, do I open to it? Do I want to change? Is there more for me? Do I have the strength, the willingness to go through it? If they say, yep, okay, now you're on a roll.
So you've been coaching people for quite a while, and during the pandemic, you created a new series, right?
Yeah, I did because I saw, people weren't getting together and people were going through this transformation. And, at that time when I created it, there wasn't too much going on in terms of transformation. Now more people are talking about it and offering classes and stuff. But I am interested in, I did it with, I did a speech for Visa's mindfulness group. And one of the executives from Visa heard me speak, and she ended up going into the Roar of the More training. And she told me it was life-changing. Now, when I hear that, I go, that's it. I mean, I did that was worth everything that's happened is worth it, just to get that kind of
a feedback.
Yeah. It means a lot to me.
I know exactly what you're saying. And then when somebody comes along with one of those unexpected compliments or spectacular things, it makes everything worthwhile, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
Yeah. Well, tell me, if people want to reach out to you, learn more about Roar of the More, or your company, and maybe seek coaching and so on, how do they do that?
Yeah, they can go to www.openmindadventures.com. openmindadventures.com. And on the menu bar, you'll see the Roar of the More, and there's a video and information and testimonials. And, it's for people who are not just interested. It's for people who are committed to themselves, who have that self-love that says, there's another chapter for me. I can sense there's more in me, more potential, more, whatever it is, confidence, love, whatever, and they want it. they're ready for it. Those are the people that I'm looking for. And in terms of the coaching and I do something called shared ownership for success with corporations, where we get people together and we have conversations that matter. And I did this with one organization that was the tax division of a worldwide international accounting firm. And 2 years later, I just got a letter from them rather, saying that their revenue went up 35%. And people are getting together more and working as an engaged team. So, that's on my website too, the shared ownership for success process. And, all you got to do is just, fill out the contact form, and I'm there for you. Or email me at Aimee@Open Minded Venture. I spell my name Aimee. It's French, Aimee at Open Minded Ventures. And I'm very accessible.
There you go. Well, I hope people will reach out. You've offered, I think, a lot of good insights that I hope people will take advantage of. We need to bring more sanity into our world anyway. So I hope that people listen to what you have to say and that they will take advantage of the many opportunities that you bring. I assume you coach people all over the world?
Yeah, I do. I did a speech for Edgewalkers International. I don't know if you know them, but they're an international organization of people who walk the edge between the spiritual and material world. And they tend to be very intelligent people who are doing good things in the world. Someone heard me speak, and all of a sudden I had a coaching client from Dubai. So, and I've worked at the Port of Singapore. And so, yes, I'm available to whoever, is ready for me.
Well, I hope people will reach out, and I want to thank you for being here with us today, and I want to thank you for listening out there. We really appreciate you taking the time to hear what Aimee has to say and hearing all of the various parts of our conversation. So thanks very much. We would appreciate you giving us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to Unstoppable Mindset. We value your ratings, and of course, needless to say, love the 5-star ratings whenever you can. So please do it. If you want to reach out to me to learn more about some of what we're doing with the podcast, and also, as I've mentioned, I am a public speaker, so you're welcome to reach out to me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. That's michaelhi@accessibe.com. If you want to learn more about our podcast, you can certainly go to www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. Michael Hingson is MichaelHingson. So michaelhingson.com/podcast. And love again to hear from you. Appreciate your ratings. Appreciate all that you have to say. And most important of all, Aimee, we really appreciate you being here with us today and taking the time to give us so many great insights and thoughts.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.